What's up, guys? Welcome back to Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson. I'm Scott McNally, and all of our programming is brought to you by Scott's book, BYOBBcoach.com. You can get that at BYOBBcoach.com. Be your own bodybuilding coach. Or, Scott, do you still have the hardcover signed that you're offering?
It's on eBay. Yep, it's on eBay.
Cool. Mm-hmm. So you can order the hardcover, but right now Scott's got the best deal if you get it straight through him. And are you still donating like 15% of the proceeds to the ASPCA?
Yeah, I am, and I have a quick thought on that, if it's okay with.
Yeah.
Someone pointed out to me too that the president or the highest up CEO of the ASPCA makes like $700,000 per year. Right,
nonprofit.
It's a nonprofit. I'm like, oh man. And I looked into that, and there was also some misinformation from what I could tell as to what percentage of the money they take in actually goes to dogs. So I looked into that just to make sure for a second. I'm like, I'm going to have to change charities or do something different. But that number is with the amount of money that comes into that organization. That number is in line. All the CEOs for basically, not all of them, but the vast majority, it seems, of CEOs with at high end, big number charities take in around $1 million per year because they're CEOs, and it's kind of like, I think this is just how our society is. If someone's able to bring in that much money, then that's the salary that they deserve, regardless if it's for a charity or not. So it's good that they're working for the charity because then it benefits the charitable cause. So I was like, I don't know about that. I'm like, because
you're okay with
ethically, it's sort of, it's the lesser of two evils, or it's just kind of what comes with the deal. If you want a badass CEO that manages things well and brings more money in and makes the charity more successful in doing its charitable work,
I see.
You got to pay him accordingly. It's just kind of how it is.
I want to be a CEO. That's the lesson out of this. I need to become a CEO of something, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make, you have to. I think there has to be a certain mentality for someone who, because it's your money driven.
You're
right?
hired. You're fired.
Yeah.
Close.
That show's back on now. I saw that.
Yeah. Anyway, all of our programming is also brought to you guys by TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINK over there for additional savings. I got to order my collagen, by the way. I'm running out of collagen. Like I said, code THINK over there and supplementsource.ca for Canadians. We've got some Patreon stuff. In fact, we might have some. I think we're going to lead with a Patreon question today. I think it was from Peyton. Where was this one, Scott? It was about, would love to hear the different opinions on organic versus non-organic and grass-fed versus grain-fed foods. Do you think it is worth the extra cost?
So I thought the best way to address this, I mentioned before, it may not be in this recording, but I have a 2-part article on John Meadows' site, mountaindogdiet.com. It's a few years old now, but you don't really need to know, as far as answering this question and making your own personal decision. You don't necessarily need to know, unless you have some very specific health concern, like that you have a particular cancer or something like that is highly probably caused by a specific pesticide, or you have you're immunocompromised in some way or something like that. But the basics of what I'm about to sort of explain here still hold, so you can kind of get an idea if you want to make the call. And it's a personal decision, right? It's not black or white. So a couple thoughts. I'm kind of just gonna read these and try not to sound like I'm just reading out of a book here, but here's some ideas. So USDA organic. I didn't just know what this meant before I wrote this. I thought organic, like anything with a carbon in it is organic. I'm thinking like a chemist, like what does organic mean? But it's a label that the USDA approves based on how produce is farmed, or meat as well. So it's an agricultural label that you can put on the product. It's different than natural. Transitional is, and I'll talk about this. So transitional, it refers to a farm that is doing the things that they would have to do to be labeled organic. So, and there's a whole list of those. You can read those online. But not using pesticides, certain farming methods, and you have to do that for a period of time. So let's say you start off and you've been using certain kinds of pesticides. it takes X number of years for those things to leave the soil and no longer be in the produce that you produce. So you're transitional for a period of time. They sort of put your probational, so to speak, and then you can become organic after X number of years. So it's different than antibiotic free. Free range is different. So you can look into all that, what that means in terms of eggs and other terms that may or not be approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. So organic food tends to be lower in pesticides, but some other differences, and it's variable, like mycotoxins, heavy metals, bacterial levels. It's not as predictable. Organic produce has higher nutrients, lower in nitrates. So nitrates can form nitrosamines, which are DNA damaging, so potentially carcinogenic. You tend to see that organic pork and chicken is less likely to be bacterial cross-contaminated, but the bacteria are less likely. They may be cross-contaminated because that just happens, but the bacteria are less likely to be antibiotic resistant. So to contextualize that, that's sort of a factoid that you see in some of the research. But when was the last time you got sick from eating pork or chicken? You're not eating it raw. So is that relevant?
That's a good point.
Don't know. Yeah. So it's important to context. All this is sort of about context. The variation in toxin and nutrient levels in organic products are a matter of how long the farm has been practicing organic methods. So this would be relevant. So other farming practices, the climate and seasonal conditions, species or breed of the fruit, the vegetable and animal, as well as the country of origin. So it's going to vary depending on if you're getting organic from Mexico, like if you're in the southern United States, that's a common thing. Where it's coming from, which farm, you can ask. Like I used to go to farmers markets a good bit, and sometimes there were farmers there that were basically according to their word, and I trusted them in most cases. You know, sort of have to go by instinct whether you believe someone, but they said we're following organic, but we haven't actually done that because I think there is an expense associated with being getting the USDA's approval as being organic. So there's something there. And like for instance, the best example, Jojoba Beef Company was out in the Arizona area, and I used to buy, like I would buy 100 1-pound chucks of ground beef from him, from this guy, and he could actually pick the cow that he would pull that from, or the cows sometimes. Because I like to get the leaner stuff just to keep the fat low, and he could sort of size the cow up, and I could just see from the marbling, right? And I was buying, 100 pounds at a shot. So he would deliver it to the gym, and sometimes I would distribute the meat like other people would want some, so I would put it in my freezer, and then I give 20 pounds or sell just give for the same price, 20 pounds to Dave Henry got some when we were training. Mike Gustafson I think may have gotten some, and other friends there, people who are at the gym, like, hey, you guys want some of this, So if you look
Dave Henry meat, it's now one of the secrets.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's it's all about that. I think he still is in contact with that guy because that's
he is. I've seen his
special sauce. It's the special sauce, baby.
Yeah.
It's not hard to find. So there's a price lookup number, a PLU number, the little sticker that's on fruits and vegetables, so you can see, and if it has a 9, that means it's organic. Oh. If it has an 8, that means it's a GMO, for what that's worth. So if you're concerned about that, or your reasons for going organic or not are going to go hand in hand. You have to educate yourself on the product that you're looking at, the farming practices, if you possibly can. If you're buying in the store or direct from the farmer. So it's a complicated scene you'll have to kind of navigate. Organic beef, just those kind of switching to beef here, and grass-based diets, etc. It'll have a favorable fatty acid content that's more like what you see in grass-fed beef. It's the feed that the animal is fed that changes what you find in the meat. So cattle are ruminants. They have a very different digestive system than we do as humans. So what they're fed, how the bacteria in the ruminant digestive system then takes that feed and then makes fatty acids, and also how much antioxidants are found in the beef depends on what they're given. So I kind of use the example, like if you take a human and just say, okay, there's your vending machine right there in the corner. You can have anything you want out of the vending machine. All the stuff that is, will survive a nuclear apocalypse, right? All the stuff in plastic bags that will sit there forever, that's highly processed, and eat that for a year. And then compare that with someone who goes grocery shopping and they just stay on the outside. They buy only the stuff that was once alive and is, still semi-alive, right? Or more recently alive, not processed. And it's going to change the composition of what's in your body, right? You're going to end up, you are what you eat. Like, I've seen different numbers, so I can't say which is exactly true, but somewhere around, it depends on the tissue and the turnover rates of the tissue, but somewhere around like 90% of your body's molecules are replaced in the course of a year.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so you're like a new person each year, and that's from a bodybuilding perspective, that's really, really cool to think about. So, that's why you can have like nutrient deficiencies. If you don't have any vitamin C, for instance, you're going to get scurvy. Like, there's the classics like that. But what you eat is, your DNA, your body's biological system does a good job of maintaining all those things. Otherwise, you just get very, very sick. But the molecules are turning over. They're breaking down and they're turning over. So that's the same thing happens with the beef. So grass-fed diet. So if we're talking about beef now, and I'm talking about the meat now, it's going to be higher generally in anti-inflammatory, omega-3s and conjugated linoleic acids. It's important to know the omega-3s that are there are not really a major source compared to fatty fish. Like, if you just ate, I don't even know, you'd have to go and calculate this, but just eating grass-fed beef versus, it's not going to satisfy your omega-3 needs unless that's maybe all that you ate and nothing else, all your calories came there. It's not really a major source. It's a nice perk, but it's not really that significant in the grand scheme of things.
Years ago, you remember a little podcast called The Swoley Trinity?
Yeah.
I remember Alan Aragon broke that down into detail, like the specifics of what you're actually getting from omega fats from beef, man, and it really was eye-opening, but just a tiny fraction compared to, like you said, fatty fish. I never knew that.
Yeah, so you'll see that's like a thing that's advertised. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to get my omega-3s this way, and I really don't like salmon or steelhead trout or mackerel or what have you.
Yeah.
You can just supplement with those things. As far as fats, like, for instance, Hoba Beef Company. Sorry, I know. Yeah, we got to protect the house. Yeah. You're not going to necessarily end up with a leaner cut of beef per se. That varies, of course, depending on which cut of beef it is in general. But like I said, with the Hoba Beef Company, like, he kind of he picked that out for me, right? Yeah. It wasn't always the case. Like, this is the lean stuff, and I could tell there was variability there.
Yeah.
But I just like getting, and some of the reason why I got that was at that time there was a period, I know I've mentioned it here, but there was a period of time when I was eating 90+% of my food raw.
Oh, wow.
Which was awesome. I felt amazing. It was I didn't have to cook anything. So, a little aside there, on those days, we were going to farms and picking my own fruits and vegetables, going to a place like Trader Joe's where I could get organic stuff, that I would still wash it off a little bit, just as general course of action. But I just throw everything in a big cooler, and threw a couple ice packs in there, including like a chub of beef. And
then I would eat beef raw.
I'd eat the beef raw. I was eating turkey raw. I didn't eat chicken. I stayed away from chicken. I'd eat tuna, sushi grade tuna raw.
Okay, yeah.
And of course, the only cooked food I was eating was sushi, and that was the rice in the sushi. And I do that a couple of times a week. If
you were to do that again now, and you documented the whole thing with like a high quality cell phone camera, I feel like we could get you 100,000 followers overnight.
It's a breeze to do. I just have to seek out a place that I trust for the meat.
I've never eaten raw meat. Yeah. Never.
Okay.
I mean, not even sushi? I've had sushi. I'm not a fan. I couldn't imagine this, man. I could not imagine this. But I'm sorry, I'm taking us a side note there.
It's funny because, like, I've even in the last, it's not been so long, like sometimes I refer friends that are back in the Tucson area to acupuncturists that are there that remember me from when I was doing this when I was in acupuncture school. And I say, hey, tell him I said hello. And then they'd come back to me and say, well, they say, hey, is he still eating raw meat? Like,
he didn't keel over. Yeah.
They still remember that, right?
Wow.
So yeah, but I trusted, I trusted his stuff. So that was not a problem, and I never got sick doing that. Not once.
Wow.
I tell you what, like corn, like raw corn on the cob. Oh my God, it's so good. It's so sweet.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, as an aside, there was you won't even be able to find it. It's not even on the internet. There was a form of eating called anopsology that a French guy named Berger. I have like a printout of like his document as to how you do this. But he was the idea from this. This is a total aside now. We're kind of having fun here, but was that when we started cooking food, maybe 10,000 years ago or so, you change the chemical content, and that then disallows our brain. And we know this, there are certain things that people just tend to overeat. We've got so much fat and sugar, and foods are manufactured and also presented to you in ways to get people to overeat. I mean, God, look at what's happening to our rates of obesity and overweight. So, but when you eat this way, he believed in this idea of a taste change. And I've actually, sugar, you can do this with sugar snap peas. I did this in my anatomy and physiology class I taught at the acupuncture school. You give people sugar snap peas that are raw, and you say, just start eating these. And some people eat 30 or 40 of them, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they get a taste change. It goes from being sweet and yummy to tastes, ugh, and they'll even spit out, right? Some people eat 3 or 4, and then they'll be like, oh, what the hell? And is it a bad one? No, it's not brown. It's not the nasty one. It doesn't have some ick on it or something. And then I just go try another one. And so something is changed in terms of their sensory system in their body. And the idea is this is his idea, is that this was an evolutionarily evolved system for allowing us to navigate with our appetite, making sure that our nutrient needs are met. And you see people when they become nutrient deficient, sometimes you see this with dogs, they'll end up with having pica, it's called, where they'll start eating dirt and non-food items. Dirt has lots of minerals in it, electrolytes, which the idea would be that those dogs, I haven't seen this documented directly, this is just the notion, but those dogs are doing that because they want something there, or they eat poop, which gives them bacteria for their microbiome, of course, right? So the idea is that your system, your appetite control system, is somehow engaged in ensuring that you get the things that you need. Protein leveraging, we've talked about here before too. That's the idea that the appetite, your overall appetite, is based on ensuring that you get enough protein in your diet. So if you eat more protein, then your appetite goes down, and glucagon gets released with more protein. That actually inhibits appetite. So we know some mechanisms, at least on a hormonal level, related to that. So you'd eat this. I just eat this food, and I just brought a whole a smorgasbord, a little mini buffet of the things that I wanted, that I thought I might like, and then I just eat whatever I want. And I always liked the beef, and I was still training at the time, so that I had an increased protein need. So I always liked the beef, and then all of a sudden, I'm done with the beef. I'm going to have some carrots. I tried to do things that were seasonal and regional specific. That's so, and I just eat until I didn't want to eat anymore, and I just would kind of graze throughout the day. Ended up being, I had to, because I was in classes and I had clinic and I was at a busy day. So I couldn't just pop open the cooler and start eating during my lectures and that sort of thing. But anyway, but I was getting grass-fed beef that had nothing on it. The jojoba beans it had a certain flavor, and he had Africanized cows that were really well adapted to the heat of, in this case, Africa, but now they're in Arizona. So they're not up there going, oh my God, they're just not, they were really well acclimatized and genetically adapted to being in the heat. So they were a really good breed of cow to have. It was really humane. And they lived to be 10 years old on average, 8 to 10 years. So they lived full lives.
Wow.
Took him a while to get there. It was so much the opposite of what you typically see in the agricultural industry, where if they're grass, we can get back on track now. If they're grain fed, they gain weight more quickly. They have a greater feed efficiency, right?
Right.
And you get more marbling that way potentially. which can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what you're looking for. And then they want to basically optimize how much food you have to give the animal relative to how much meat you get from it, right? So once the animal is sort of reached its, after X number of years, less than 50% of its life expectancy, it's not growing anymore. So why keep feeding it? This is the perspective from the agriculture. It's like, so that's when you slaughter. So the animals are a couple, 3 years old, something like that. I don't know exactly the number. Whereas he was keeping his animals for 8 to 10 years. And he just had enough of them so they could live a full life. And they're out on the range doing what cows do. So what you feed the animals then will change, for instance, grass versus grain-fed, the saturated fatty acid contents. The composition, but not the content per se, unless you find someone who has lower fatty acids or lower fat content. And they'd have to do an analysis. But you tend to see more cholesterol neutral fatty acids in the grass-fed animals. And remember that grass is the food that cows are sort of meant to eat. Feeding them grains is just a financial hack to get them to grow with a greater feed efficiency because it costs less to do that.
Of course.
Yeah, so the grass-fed diets, you have more vitamin A and E, so those are good. Glutathione and even superoxide dismutase, so those are antioxidants, are higher in the grass-fed versus the grain-fed. So you might get lower fat content, but not necessarily. There also is a different flavor. Not everyone can tell this, but many people can tell, and it's, I think if you've been eating for so many years, so many food sources that have so much shit, so many chemicals in it, your taste buds probably lose some of their ability to distinguish the finer differences between a grain-fed or grass-fed.
I'm sure.
And you may not even like the grass-fed because you've grown up eating grain-fed, and then it maybe becomes a comfort food, right? Yeah. Like this the jojoba beans that grows there in the desert. So there was this jojoba beany flavor to the meat, which I thought was great. So, and the last important thing here is that you can grass-fed animals, and sometimes when they're then taking them to slaughter or we're moving them in that direction, and then they will just grain feed them for a couple weeks, that can undo a lot of these changes you see in the fatty acid content. On the other hand, you can grass finish, right? And then that shifts things back. So it's relatively quick. It's not, and the time frame I don't know exactly. I'm sure it varies. But you can, ideally would be grass-fed, grass-finished. Worst case, if you're concerned about grass versus grain-fed, would be grain-fed, grain-finished. But if they say grass-fed and then they grain-finish for 3 months, you're like, okay, it's basically grain-fed. It doesn't really make it much of a difference. But if we have to grain feed for like the last 2 days when the animals are being moved and they're waiting in line for slaughter, so to speak, then that's not gonna matter so much. So in this case, the guy, the Jojoba Beef Company, like, he was doing all of it personally. So they had grass like right up till the day they said goodbye.
Yeah, we recently got some Piedmontese beef. It's really good, man. Delicious.
Super low in fat.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
it's
like chicken.
The lean ground beef has very, very little fat to it. The steak is absolutely delicious and tender. Unfortunately, it's not something that I can afford to always do. You know what I mean? It's kind of a specialty item for us. I've heard certain things like with fruits, pesticides, bananas, for instance, are pretty well protected from the pesticide. You can definitely, like, buying an organic banana is not going to be as advantageous as, say, certain other fruits where you're actually consuming the skins.
Or berries, for instance.
Berries, yeah.
Bananas, you're eating the inside, so it doesn't really matter. That's what the peel does for you. But yeah, that's a huge, like you could do. I mean, I'm sure there are entire podcasts that are dedicated just to this topic, and they go through and they talk about specific pesticides and how toxic they are and what the research suggests.
Let me ask you this, because I think with our audience, the big question then is, Scott, do you think that it will make a difference in your bodybuilding if you were to pay, say, strict attention to this? Let's say you could take a guy who was eating all organic and was eating all grass-fed, and he had a twin that was just eating whatever was cheap at Walmart, whatever you could get for the best sale. Do you think you'd see a difference?
Let me add one thing before I forget. This is sort of important.
Okay.
It's but that's the question. You're just rephrasing. That's the essence. So I'm not blowing past that. But one thing I wanted to add is that you will see grass-fed protein powder.
Oh yeah.
Like a whey isolate or what have you. And the grass or grain feeding changes the fatty acid content. But then when you make a whey isolate, you're removing the fat. So that becomes an ethical rather than a product quality concern, the way I see it. So the proteins are gonna be essentially the same, right?
Yeah.
And so once you get to the point of having a whey protein powder that's devoid of fats, it's not a big deal. There are actually, if you get undenatured whey concentrate, so just there actually is an antioxidant effect to that, which has been it's been well documented, some older studies. So, but you don't really see that. People they're avoiding those fats, let's say. So yeah, that's the question. Right? Is this going to make a difference? So I can think of several ways that it potentially could. If you are someone, so there are people, for instance, on one side of things that have multiple chemical sensitivities, right? So they go into some businesses, and like we had to have this in my clinic years ago. And if someone came in, there's sometimes both men and women, they wear lots of cologne or lots of perfume, and you're like, oh, that smells nice, and it doesn't go away. Like the smell is like so overwhelming.
Yeah, they leave, it's still there.
Right, but so it's strong, and so some people like literally will start to have allergic reactions. So they're that sensitive. So you could someone, if these two twins, if they both were so genetically predisposed to have chemical sensitivities to things that are in non-organic foods that they're unaware of, that could then have an impact, especially if they started taking in large amounts of one particular food, like a lot of bodybuilders do, because I really like this, that, and the other. This particular berry is like, that's going to be my fruit source, right?
Yeah.
That might end up putting a kind of a kink in the cogs of their progress. This is an aside and different, but there's been a couple bodybuilders, one of whom is one of our fellow podcasters, who started eating lots of sushi grade tuna.
Oh yeah,
and Andrew, right? And they ended up with mercury issues. Mm-hmm. So a more moderate consumption wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But when you're doing what bodybuilders do, who are busy just trying to get the food in, you eat that same thing over and over again. Then that toxin, especially if you're particularly sensitive to it, could be something that could have an impact on you.
Yeah.
The other thing I wonder too, it depends on the person, and I haven't seen this study. This is just from like experience. For instance, with all the raw food I was eating, that's one version of clean, right? I was about as clean as you can get, right? Not cooked, like just straight from nature. We were picking the fruits and vegetables. I put them in the fridge. I pull them out, wash them off, and eat them. That was it, just to get the dirt off. I was eating raw sweet potatoes right out of the ground, baby. And it was good. It tasted good. My taste for things was substantially changed. So let's say someone's dieting down, right? Yeah. And they do, and there's like Aaron Singerman did this. He tried to use an if it fits your macros approach. This is the kind of the famous one people can see. He may have gotten rid of these videos, but this is a long time ago. Yeah. I think before he even started his supplement company.
Way before, yeah.
Yeah. You remember this, right? And he did not look good on stage. Everyone was watching him. Like he was, kind of like Sam Sulik. Everyone's like watching, like, how's he going to do? And Aaron was doing men's physique, and he didn't look good, but he was just going to a diner in the morning, and he was just eating whatever. And he didn't really care about, anything other than the calories and then maybe his protein, if it fit his macros, right?
Yeah.
But if you're dieting down, let's say, and you're eating foods that aren't organic, that are more processed, that may tend to cause you to want to eat more of those things versus foods that are much more satisfying. You froze up on me, so hopefully you can still hear me. I'm going to keep talking. This could potentially impact actually your micronutrient status to some degree, all the things I mentioned before, and your you're still frozen, so I hope you're good. Okay, good.
I'm good.
And your appetite.
Yeah.
And how? Okay, good. And how well you were able to sort of manage the diet, because the foods will taste better. They may then be more satisfying as long as they're not causing you to binge. But like you eat, and many people can tell the difference between organic fruits and vegetables and non-organic. The taste can be worlds apart in some cases. And that depends on, again, where you got it from, maybe how long it's been in transit. There's coatings that they're putting on some of this stuff now to keep it fresh for longer.
Or to ripen it. Get your apples to ripen when you want them to ripen.
All this stuff, right? So this is organic, kind of is a major step in protecting you from all this junk. And like I said, this article is a little bit old, so there may be some things like, who knows? I don't want to be conspiratorial here, but there may be some things that still happen to organic, USD organic fruits and vegetables that that really shouldn't, if you based on the nature of what organic is supposed to mean.
Tanya was with us, and she said worth mentioning organic produce uses pesticides too, and those pesticides aren't regulated like conventional. So, what else
There's
is going on there?
certain ones that are allowed, and so you have to look that up. I can't remember.
Yeah,
like I said, it's been a while, but there are certain that they can, and those are ones that were deemed. So, you got so that's one aspect of the question. Would it make a difference in terms of your appetite levels or whether you have chemical sensitivity? The other thing is, ethically. In terms of like let's say you're talking about beef now, what do you think about the agricultural industry in terms of how they're treating these animals in general, right? Yeah. Or in terms of eggs, are they free range? If they're not, you can see there's horrific information out there on what happens with chickens, where they just jam them together and they pump them full of antibiotics, and some large percentage of them die off because it's like one chicken per square foot or something like that, and there's they die and they trample on each other and they're running around in their own feces. It's just awful. So just how you're psychologically, how you feel about eating lots of eggs, let's say if eggs are a mainstay of your diet, could be affected. So how well are you going to do with that? Like, are you going to think, gosh, like I've got this luxury that I'm enjoying as a bodybuilder and eating all these high protein foods and all beef and chicken and these things, and I can't with good conscience do this. This is why some people are vegetarians. So they're animal lovers and they just I just can't be involved with this at all, right? But if you feel like, I'm not going to be able to bodybuild very well as a vegetarian, right? Necessarily, there are ways around that too. It's another topic, but at least this way I can know that in the sort of cycle of life, these animals are being treated relatively well. They're on the side of the spectrum where they're being taken care of.
Yeah.
So lower in pesticides and different pesticides is important. So you have to and with each type of produce, there's different rules and regulations. And I really honestly I don't know exactly where it stands now. And I mean, especially who knows what our new administration may be doing down the line as far as that goes too. That could all change because there's so many things that are getting turned upside down.
Yeah.
So they may abolish the USDA organic program.
So there's those aspects. So you're saying kind of the moral side of it. There's the allergens side or the sensitivities side
Potentially,
to it,
yeah.
possibly.
Mm-hmm.
Nutrients. Are you getting that many more nutrients? I wonder if that in itself, over the long haul, is going to make a difference. Man, I can tell you that
Not if you're supplementing.
You see somebody who's like Amish people, and I've seen people that are kind of removed from our society, and I'm just like, man, they look so healthy. These people just look healthier in some cases. I know that's a big generalized statement, but I've seen people that like they haven't been exposed to everything, all the chemicals we've been exposed to over the years, and if we're supercharging all the stuff as a bodybuilder, you're not just eating, pesticides and all that. You're like super eating pesticides. You know what I'm saying?
You're eating more food, yeah. Your consumption might be twice that of a normal person.
Right. So I wonder, man. I do wonder, but it would be such an expensive experiment to figure out,
So the thing like Amish, that's a good example. Like you see this with, and I'm no expert here, but with many health-related behaviors that they will tend to coexist. So every once in a while, you'll see someone who's like, "Wow, it's so contradictory. Like you're a vegetarian and you only eat organic, but you're a smoker." It's like, hey, what are you doing? I mean, that's probably just because they're addicted to it. But a lot of times, you don't see, people who eat really well. Sometimes you see this, but it seems like you don't see people who eat really well and they exercise really well, and then they're just horrible alcoholics. If they have one really powerful vice, it seems like
Tanya said the Amish are eating seasonally.
Yeah, I was seasonally and local too, so they were able to grow their own stuff. That's kind of what we were doing. I go to these farms that were local to Tucson. Yeah. And so I was eating what was available. So it wasn't anything that was being forced to grow. Right. Yeah. So there's like, this is, closer to what, I mean, interestingly enough, agriculture's only been around for maybe 10,000 years as well. So we're even agriculture is somewhat artificial. You would only eat the things that grow in your region naturally without being farmed. Yeah. It's like for an individual, it can be done, right? It can be done. You can grow all sorts of produce and those sorts of things if that's what you do. If like basically, you make enough money to run your own personal farm and eat that way, but that's just not a typical modern lifestyle. But that can be done, in a very sort of traditional sense. But anyway, so the Amish, and you looking at those examples, those aren't controlled examples. Those are kind of natural experiments that we see, and they're doing like they're eating seasonally. They're also much more physically active. Right. So they're moving around. So there's a whole lifestyle, and that's just one piece of it. So whether you change like one thing went to organic, and actually I'm glad you brought that up, because this was probably one of the most important points for a lot of the listeners is that if you're someone who's enhanced, right? So you're using gear, you've got potential contaminants if you're on the black market. You've got benzoate, benzyl alcohol. Ethyl oleate, whatever solvents, things that might potentially have toxins, have the carrier oils that could have possible negative effects, inflammatory effects. Right. You're super physiological in terms of your gear use, so you're just not doing TRT and try to keep yourself balanced out. You've got a toxic load there of sorts, right? And I think there's no doubt about that, right? This is what kind of comes with it. This is one part of enhanced bodybuilding. It's just part of the deal. So, how much you could offset that by eating a super clean. I think if you take someone who's just eating just tons of processed stuff versus someone who's just staying in the perimeter of the grocery store, so to speak, and only choosing the organic, grass-fed, or better yet, going to a farmer's market and talking to the farmers themselves and finding out what they do as far as their farming practices. And for each of these foodstuffs, like eggs, the lutein content in eggs, for instance, is different depending on what they've eaten, right? So, but if you did all those things, at least what I think tends to go along with that, and this relates kind of the notion you brought up with the Amish, is that if someone has the mindset that, I'm taking these risks, I'm going to do enhanced bodybuilding. I know there's some things that are maybe beyond my control. I'm trying to use farm grade stuff. I'm choosing the right carrier oils, blah, blah, blah. I know there's still some unavoidable risk that goes along because my hematocrit goes up and my, when I get on orals, my cholesterol profile goes to hell. But I'm doing everything I possibly can and taking minimal risks. I'm being progressive with my doses and everything else. And I'm doing all this stuff on the other end, the organic, which is an extra cost.
Yeah.
It's not cheap necessarily to do that, especially if you're eating a lot of stuff. It can cost a lot. I think comparing that, like I'm turning all the dials to keep myself as healthy as I possibly can be. Mm-hmm. And I'm choosing as wise as I can in terms of safety of the things that aren't necessarily intrinsically safe, inherently safe, versus someone that just says, I'm just going to eat whatever I want. I'm going out and I'm burgers and fries. It's an all you can eat, diet, fast food and junk. Yeah. And I'm just boatloading all the PEDs, blah, 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 and not doing blood work, etc. There's going to be a difference. Sure. And the question is, I think if you have someone who's really smart and meticulous about it and they're taking care of their health, being healthier, I have the sense, you're not going to see this study, but being healthier and feeling better. Like one of the things just empirically that when you're trying to bulk and you're on a bunch of junk, what have you, and you don't feel good, you don't make good gains.
Sure.
Right? So if you're doing all
that
those
sooner.
Right. I knew that sooner. I know. It's like, no, I'll just force it. And there is some forcing. Like you go in the gym and you force yourself to get more reps, get more weight. There is some you're hacking the system and pushing it to its limits to exploit your biology, become the biggest, most monstrous version of yourself that your genetics will allow. Right? So you have to have that mindset to a certain degree. But I think if you can, the better you feel when you're bulking, as long as you're making progress, and even the better you feel when you're dieting down too, that's an indicator that your system is going to do better at making those adaptations to the hypocaloric or the hypercaloric diet and the training, everything. So, doing all those things and organic and grass fed and all these things, your diet in terms of the sources of food that you're taking in various circumstances can make a difference, and you will notice that potentially in how you feel. But it can take a while, and the studies aren't this long. So like I said, like if 90 plus, some large percentage of your molecules are new over the course of a year, right? And toxins will end up, many of them are lipophilic, so they'll end up in your fat stores. I mean, I haven't seen this study directly either, but there's this notion, you'll see it propagate all over the place, is that when people stop eating lots of processed stuff and things that have pesticides and some of these lipophilic toxins, that they will go through like this phase where they're feeling really shitty, especially if they're losing weight too. So now the storage volume where those lipophilic toxins is located, and you see this happens with saunas too, so you can actually sweat out the LRH sauna method. You can go to Google Scholar and find that it actually was associated with Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. You do lose toxins when you exercise, when you drop body fat. The depots available for toxin storage. So if someone cleans up their diet and eliminates the incoming of toxins, but then, and this is the idea, I haven't seen this study directly, be a hard thing to do because you're not going to get many people who want to take these lifestyle changes, but then you could lose those toxins. You're clearing them from your system.
Yeah.
And that takes time. That takes some time. So it might be, a year until some of those toxins and their metabolites, depending on which ones, are kind of out of your system. So it could take a while, but you run. I mean, like I said, I did the raw thing for like 2 years. I felt phenomenal. I felt great. Yeah. Felt really good. Yeah. And I was just eating. I wasn't trying to bodybuild at the time. I was in school. I was studying for my board exams. I was actually working at the school, and I was the academic dean and training for the school and full-time in school and still training and running my gym. Like I had a bunch of things going on at once. So I was overloaded, but I felt phenomenal. I had just boundless energy. I wasn't drinking a bunch of coffee in the morning or anything like that. I wasn't I wasn't doing no PEDs, bodybuilding related, none of that jazz.
Okay.
I felt great. So anyway, yeah, it's a personal choice, but it's a big. The thing is, I think, and that last thing I'll say in this is that I think sometimes I don't know if there would be anything noticeable or anything that you would notice or that actually would take place if you just haphazardly shifted and say, I'm going to just pick this and this. It's not that it's bad, right? But I think for something to have a market effect that you on an individual basis would notice, you may, because you don't know which of those things may be problematic, which of those pesticides or which of those features of the beef. Maybe you're someone who just can't do well with an atherogenic diet. Like if your fatty acid composition of your meat, if you're eating lots of red meat, is very important for what happens to your blood lipids. If that's just your genetic proclivity. So you go all in, so to speak, on the healthy route. That's when you're going to be most likely, I think, to see an effect. You just say, I looked like here's the organic apples with the non-organic apples, and it's only 5 cents more per pound. I'll take the organic, and you do that, and that's the only thing you do. Yeah, you're not going to notice anything.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that makes total sense, man. That's incredible, though, and of course, leave it to Scott to give us an hour in-depth look at this.
I did, didn't I?
It's good, man.
I don't even know this area very well at all, but those are some thoughts.
It's good. It definitely, I think it maybe answers the question for a lot of us. And heck, I don't know. I'd love to be able to push further into that myself, but just the cost, man, it's a lot. Do you think? I don't even know if we have time for anything else today.
Oh shit! Okay, sorry.
No, that's all right, man. I think we went deep into this one, and we have a bunch of stuff for future episodes too. So we still have questions, and not only that, guys, you can leave us questions, because if you leave us something really good that catches Scott's attention, then there's no question. I'm sure that he's going to say, "I want to do this one next week." So I think that's a good move. I'd love to talk more with training with you, and like I mentioned in text earlier, I'm hearing more people talk about MK now. So 677.
Yeah, it's coming back, right?
It seems like it is, man.
Pendulum swings back.
It really is, right? So I would love to maybe even take just 15 minutes one day to revisit that topic and look at the research you had shown us previously, because it definitely changed my perspective on it after we talked about that, and just hear your perspective based off of what we're looking at. That'd be cool.
I'd have to go and see. Maybe there's some new stuff that's come out since that. I don't know. Maybe. If you can find it, probably you could find it easily and link to that old podcast for folks too. Not that I want to eliminate that topic again, but I don't know how much more new I'd have to say.
I don't even know where it is. I'll have to dig. I think it was on the old channel, and it was a piece. It was a piece within the old content. I don't even know if we could find it. I'm sure it was on audio only. That kind of stuff. So. It'd be cool to revisit, though. Like I said, if anything, if you'd be up for it. I wanted to ask you too, since we have a couple minutes here. I just wanted to ask you how your training is going and how the hips are doing.
Oh, hips are. It's funny. I've got someone I just met who has gotten a hip replacement, and it gave me some contrast. Very, very about as healthy as you can possibly get. Massive amounts of pain. Just got one hip replaced. Yeah. And the hip replacement per se was like it was nothing. It was literally because I was so well trained beforehand. My issue, and this is just to me, is that I got a hematoma on the right side. The left side bled out. The right side did not. Okay. I think I probably mentioned this. So after I got done, I was on the floor waiting to be checked out, and they didn't check me out. They had a change of shifts, and I was walking around the nurses' station, so they said I could, and I walked around for like an hour, right after, 2 hours after I got out of surgery. And they didn't. I'm like, hey, are you guys going to check? It's like, yeah, we'll be with you. She's like, okay. So I was talking to people, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I don't have a limp anymore. This is great. Got home, bled out. I had to go back to the ER. They shouldn't have let me do that. There's no, you shouldn't be walking. You can walk around for a few minutes, but not an hour.
Yeah, we talked about that back after it had happened. Yeah. But is that causing issues
now
still?
I have pain. I have a massive amount of scar tissue. I have pain at the location. It goes down my sartorius. And then he went in 7 weeks later to the hematoma. There was nothing, but he wanted to get a sample to see if it was infected. I don't know why they're checking this 7 weeks later, but maybe, who knows. It wasn't, but he nailed the lateral femoral cutaneous nerve. So he didn't go directly in. He went sort of at a diagonal, and I felt it zip down my leg. So I have there's nerve damage there. Okay. So it just, I mean, I just trained through it. The training isn't like, I just trained through it, but it hurts. I know what causes it to hurt, and it hurts. Like lying in bed and like right now, just lifting the leg up. It's like, you've been bodybuilding, you know, for decades too. Like there's always some that ache. So I don't even like, I think the average person would be highly annoyed by it. And I just don't even, it's just, I blow it. I kind of just blow it off. But every once in a while I'm like, this is silly, because the right side was asymptomatic. I had no problems. They were coming. The symptoms were coming. The hip was a wreck. It was actually worse than the left one. Yeah. The left side is what hurt. And now I'm, ironically enough, the right side gives me problems. It's relatively minor, but I just trained through it. Training's going good, man. I'm training here in my barn.
Nice.
I'm doing the Fortitude Training Family Man plan.
Okay. So is that three times? Three
times a week. Yeah. Yeah. Just take care of the dogs, and it's a full body 3 times a week, basically. Yeah. So it's lots of fun. And every once in a while I think, like yesterday I did glute bridges, which I don't like. I throw them in every once in a while because it was the muscle round day. I did glute bridges with like, it was like almost 500 pounds, I guess, is what it would have been. And sometimes I think, man, what happens if you break your femur? You know, it just amazes me that these prostheses, like, they're so solid. And people can check out Roman Fritz. Like Roman's now, he's had both his hips done. He had two surgeries on each side because he had problems each time. He had to get his other one done a second time. Yeah. Yeah. And he went right into squatting, and it's just sort of amazing how much these can handle. Because there's like, sometimes I think like, man, I got to remember there's a piece of metal stuck into the bone of the shaft of my femur, and it's held in there. This is modern medical science. This is badass. I can squat all I want. I can do 600-pound leg presses and 400-pound glute bridges, and it's good to go. And I could probably, if I couldn't lift it, but I could probably do it with 2,000 pounds, and it would still be okay. Yeah. So that's just, I'm super grateful for that, man. I mean, I have this, like, it was kind of medical negligence that this all happened with the thing, and they don't care, right? It doesn't matter to them. There's been like medical shenanigans. I have a whole medical shenanigan story, but I just feel so lucky that I can still do this stuff. Like, because if I hadn't gotten that done, if that weren't available, what is Tanya writing? Yeah.
She says it's funny how we're always like, how do normal people think feeling like crap normally is normal? Oh, okay.
Yeah, we can fix him. Yeah. I mean, but that's one of the things, one of the gifts of bodybuilding, kind of leave it with this, is that, especially when you're dieting down, or even like there's so many struggles there's so many challenges, that it resets your perspective, because we don't get this in a normal modern Western world. Like, life is pretty friggin' easy. We drive our cars places. We don't have to do manual labor. We don't have to hunt our food. We don't have to grow our food. We just go to the grocery store and we collect it up in baskets. We don't even put our baskets back in the rack. That's how friggin' lazy, like, we are. As I'm generalizing, I'm stereotyping, right, but of course. Like, I always bring the baskets back. I'm like, oh my God, like, where's it at? So,
you know what though? I'm going to tell you, I've got a beef with people, because there's people out there who are like, I'm going to judge you. If you don't put your basket back, that says everything about you. So what people don't know is that the bag boy, the guy who's getting the baskets, he has some different alternatives that he has to do at work. There's a few different things. One of the jobs is he has to clean up the poop out of aisle 7 that some elderly person left. He's got to clean up the toilets.
I haven't seen that part yet, but go ahead.
He's got to clean up the toilets that somebody plugged up. Yeah. And then after that, he's got to do several other tasks that nobody else in the job will. And then from there, the manager tells him, hey, I want you to go outside and collect all those carts. And he gets to go outside and screw off for the next 30 minutes. So the further you put your basket away, the longer he gets to not have to do those other things. So that's my clap.
That's how you rationalize this. Like,
no, because I've worked in the grocery. I'd worked in the grocery industry for years, and I know exactly that's when they're smoking weed and their vapes and their cigarettes and all that, and they're not dealing with their boss for 20 minutes, unless it's freezing cold where nobody wants to be outside or raining. Yeah, those times you better put your basket away. But if it's a nice, warm, sunny day, do your grocery store clerk a favor and leave your cart as far away as you can, because he's going to take his time. Believe me, he's going to take his sweet time getting it.
Yeah, and while you're at it, like, leave it right in the middle of a parking place. So if someone wants to park there,
no, don't do
that. You have to move it out, or leave it behind another car, or just floating around.
Smacking into somebody else's car.
It's crazy. They're all over I see people do it. I just walk over and say, "Hey, let me get that for you." But it's like putting the little divider on the conveyor belt when you're there checking out. Like, I forget to do it every once in a while. But people don't do that. There's all these things that just become our norm. But you know what I do? Folks ask me, it's like, "Hey, do you need help? Help out with your groceries?" I'll just say, I said, "You want a break?" And they're like, I was like, "What do you?" I said, "You want? Yeah, I could use some help. Come on out." And I'll just walk out and say, "Hey, I figure you need a little bit of a break." I look to see if there's no other person behind me, if there's no one there,
their manager or something. Yeah,
the manager, like a huge line where people need to be sped up. But if it's just like empty, I'm like, "Hey, you want a break? You want to go outside? It's a nice day. Like, come on out here." And I'll say, "I just wanted to give you a chance to get outside. I actually don't need your help." So I do offer them that, but you're right.
I like that.
Yeah. So maybe what I'll do from now on, Scott, is I will gather together the carts and put them all together and push them to the end of the parking lot, right?
Yeah. What's that guy out there doing? Yeah.
So they don't have the extra work to do, so that's nice. I'm doing but they still get to get outside. And they have the long walk, so it's a kind of like splitting the difference between your strategy, right? I have yet to see poop in aisle 7 at the grocery store, though. I haven't.
Yeah, you're lucky.
You've seen that. Yeah?
You're lucky.
Yeah.
Ron Partlow told me that he worked at a department store that was connected to a mall, and that there would be a point in time where they'd say, "Okay, guys, I want you 3. There's 3 guys who did the bagging and stuff. I want you 3 to go collect carts." And they would literally, 3 teenage boys for work would have to go walk through the mall for a half hour. So you can imagine the antics they got into. You know what I mean? Looking for girls and everything else.
They'd be gone for an hour and 45 minutes. It's a big mall.
We
went in every store just in case. There ended up one back in the changing room, of Victoria's Secret. They had to go back in there and check.
You never know, man. Never know.
Oh, geez, that's funny.
Well, I'm glad you're doing pretty good with it, Scott. We'll wrap this thing up. I know you got other stuff to do. And guys, definitely check out Scott's book, byobbcoach.com. I'll put a link in the description to get the hardcover autographed by Scott and to donate some money to the ASPCA. We're also brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINKOVER there, and SupplementSource.ca for Canadians. Thank you guys for Patreon. This was an entire Patreon episode thanks to you and thanks to Peyton. So thank you very much.
Right. Yeah, good question.
And for another episode, guys, Muscle Minds, we'll see you soon.
Peace.